All right. Welcome to the Bacon, Bibles, and Barbells Podcast. My name is Justin Johnson, and I'm joined by Coach Amanda. Today, we're going to talk about cardio for strength athletes, or kryptonite, as some powerlifters call it.
Mm-hmm.
So Amanda just moved, and she joined us from her new place. So everybody give a round of applause to Amanda for actually hopping on a podcast just a few days after moving 7 hours or something like that.
Yeah, it's been a big move, but I prioritize setting up my little station here so I can get back to content.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. Yeah, we were going to have Bill was going to be here, but he had something come up that he wasn't aware of. So here we are. You get we switch topics, and this is what we're rolling with. So cardio for strength athletes. Now, I think that if you just went on the internet and started searching around for 10 years ago, should I do cardio as a strength athlete? What kind of information do you think the average person would have stumbled upon?
Probably a lot of the cardio kills gains. There's so many memes out there joking about what cardio is, like walking to the squat rack. That's cardio. That's it. You're done. You walked
Loading
there.
plates.
Yeah, loading plates. If you get out of breath at all, going up, walking from your car to your front door, that's the cardio for a powerlifter. But that's a common misconception. There is a balance, of course, and we'll talk about that here in how much to do, what's too much cardio, what happens if you don't do cardio, and the implications for different types of strength sports.
Yeah, definitely. And so kind of to segue into that, and I'll say this in my background, I was definitely, so I've been training for 23 years or something like that, just most of it was not very smartly. And I would say I started getting a bit smarter about it about 8 years ago. And I've been consistent during that time ever since. But when I started, I was still in the cardio kills gains camp. Now I still went for walks and I did things like that. And I went from 140 pounds to 200 pounds in several months, just stuffed my face as much as I possibly could. It wasn't all junk. There was some junk in there, of course. It wasn't unhealthy food necessarily. Got way stronger. But my cardio was dead after that. I mean, I used to before that, I could walk indefinitely. I could just walk and walk and walk. By the time I finished with that bulk, I was probably walk half a mile and I'd start breathing heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely made me less functional as a person, I would say. And I really doubt that it did much in particular to help me get stronger at this point, especially with just my experience and other things. So I think it might be good to talk about, so kind of foreshadow what we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about how this applies to the sort of the major strength sports and with a nod to bodybuilding at the end. So we're going to be talking about strongman and powerlifting, which will kind of apply equally to Olympic lifting as well. And also tie in at the end with bodybuilding and that sort of thing. And so I think you have the most experience in your coaching and things like that, working with strongman athletes. It's a little easier to talk about how beneficial it is, of course, especially now. I would say this, I would say several years ago, strongman, honestly, I think because of Eddie Hall, was very static strength focused. There wasn't as much movement. The reps were lower and that sort of thing. And not just, I mean, the weights the weights are still going up every year at nationals and everywhere else. So it's not like people are getting weaker, but higher rep ranges are actually still expected more and more, it seems like. So as far as the strongman world, where would you say the benefits are? What should strongman competitors be thinking about in their off season when they're preparing for a show in particular and that sort of thing? What should be their focus and what benefits should they expect if they begin to add cardio in, and there's someone that especially might not be used to doing any particular cardio at all?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned Eddie Hall. Eddie Hall and Mitch Hooper are both two athletes that kind of changed the game when it comes to cardio with strongman. Eddie Hall was a swimmer before he was doing strongman. Mitch Hooper was running marathons before he started strongman, and they just blew everybody out of the water. So it kind of ruined the myth of not having any cardio. Of course, they weren't doing that level of cardio any longer when they were competing in strongman. That would definitely affect how strong you could get if you're running marathons.
Yeah.
That's too much interference in sports there. But um, strongman, it's a little easier to talk about conditioning and cardio because there is a lot of moving, and you really do notice the work capacity increase when you have some cardio. Whenever you're doing carries for time, like you're trying to beat, it's a race. It's not
Hmm.
just take your time and do this lift and be as heavy as you possibly can. You are
Yeah.
having to race. You are carrying heavy weights and you're moving fast. Um, and so it's quite easy to see why cardio is important, but it does need to be done properly. You're not just going to go on long runs. There's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of explosiveness, a lot of even footwork drills because of the way you have to step when you're doing yoke carries and things like that.
Yeah.
That can be considered conditioning and also a drill for improving your skills. Um, but for strongman, I've often programmed hill sprints if you're in an area
Hmm.
where you have access to a hill. I actually just moved away from an area that was incredibly flat. So
I
we
was
did
just
other things.
about to make a joke about Texas, but you did it for me. So,
I got
so
hills
not
here.
Texas.
We got a big hill where I am now. I mean, we do have the hill country.
Yeah.
But things like sled dragging or pushing are really good things, or even just doing some higher rep, a little bit lighter weight. It would probably feel like CrossFit. CrossFit is honestly a lot of cardio. So if you
Yeah.
kind of treat some of your training like that, take some of the weight off and you're doing more reps, that is also good for a strongman type conditioning.
Yeah. And one thing I like doing with strongman, and I've done this for myself and other clients for conditioning purposes, is it's great if you can use the implements for conditioning, like just
Mhm.
lighter loads, because you get a familiarity with the implement because you're just going to be using it year round or for a longer time than you would just for a prep. And you're going to wind up that familiarity will make it so that it's easier to transition to heavier weights later. And like what I've done for myself, because I'm not very good at yoke, like I can pick up a heavy yoke, but I just don't move very efficiently with it. And so in my off seasons, sometimes I've just had like a 400-pound yoke, and I'll just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth over and over again, just for the purpose of conditioning. And I'll basically run it kind of like sprints, where I'll do like a 4 laps or something, and then I'll wait for a minute, and then 4 laps, and I'll wait for a minute, and that kind of thing. You can do this with farmers. I've done the same thing with sandbags. Sandbags are like the worst
Mhm.
for conditioning, but even throwing too. So like whatever event you're weak at, it can make sense for you to pick a much lighter load and do that for higher volume for the purpose of conditioning. Like when my first year of strongman, I was there was a throwing event and I kind of winged it and I did terrible. And I was like, I shouldn't be bad at throwing. Like throwing shouldn't be something that I'm bad at. It just didn't make sense. And
Mhm.
so I threw like every week for a year. Well, if you're throwing a lot, like that is cardio. If you're doing it where you're like, you throw over the bar and then you run around, go grab it, throw over the bar, and you're running back and forth and tossing, you're going to get out of breath pretty quickly. And that ended up being a lot of good conditioning for me. And as a result, of course, my throwing became far better, where so that like a year later I was that event I took second place at the Rainier Pro Am show. And the guy that beat me, there's no way I could possibly touch him. It was like me and him, and then everybody else. But he still beat me by a decent amount.
Wow.
I like because I had like a PR run, because I set up
Uh-huh.
my gym exactly like they were going to do their format, and like I nailed everything, and it was the best I could possibly do. I knew that when I did the run, and he was after me, and I watched him. I was just like, "There's no way I'm going to do that." But anyway, that paid off well for that event for me because I addressed a
Mhm.
weakness while also getting in better shape, and my conditioning wasn't a problem. And this was specifically a sandbag event where you had like I think it was 90 seconds. And you would throw back and forth over the bar. And actually, the further distance you threw it away from the bar, the more points you would get. And so I figured out a ratio that worked well for me and my body size and how things could go. And so I had an exact plan for how far I was throwing, and I worked my way in a little bit as I fatigued, and it worked out great. All that to say, that kind of approach worked well. So pick your weakness and then drill it in off season for cardio and conditioning purposes. And you're also not going to get the wear and like if you're weak on yoke, you can't train a 600 and 700 pound yoke, if you're a middleweight or something year round. You're going to get beat up. It's not going to work out very well for you. But if you
Yeah.
can be in the 300s, 400s or something like that and do high reps, you're going to acquire a familiarity with the yoke, and you're going to move better and just feel more comfortable under it, so that when you do introduce those heavier loads the following year, you'll be in better condition, and you're just going to move better with it. I found that kind of thing, that familiarity, really does work well. And obviously there's a difference between lightweight and heavyweight. It's not
Hmm.
the same. It does move differently, but I do think it's true that if you can handle high volume when you're, especially when towards the end of that session, when you're fatigued, because even if it's only a 400-pound yoke, after you've done a bunch of laps, it's going to start feeling a lot heavier. And so the effect becomes somewhat psychologically similar. And I think physiologically it becomes a bit similar as well, as start losing control of your quads and, things like that.
Yeah, it's the same kind of principle we use for strength training in particular, where you may be doing a lot of movements with just the bar or something lighter. You're reinforcing those movement patterns so that that is your habit. And if you utilize that for strongman implements and doing lightweight with your cardio, it's going to both improve your work capacity and enable you to do those movements once it's heavier with the same good form.
Mhm.
So it's a really good kind of double whammy there. As far as off season or on season, or if you're gearing up for a meet or not, I generally run the conditioning a little harder off season,
Mhm.
because you're going to be starting to get much more specialized with the events that are coming up when you're planning and prepping for a meet. You're going to be trying to get kind of close to competition weight a little bit more often, where you may not be doing that as much in the off season, where you are actually trying to put on a lot of strength and size in an off season most of the time. But that's really where you can ramp up that cardio in the off season. When it's getting closer to a meet, it's typically more low intensity, steady state, because you want to be recovered and ready. Uh, in fact, I have an athlete competing this coming Saturday, and I told him no weights at all this week. Just go for long walks in the morning,
Yeah.
get that, a little bit of a heart rate increase, but it's not so much that it's going to be affecting your recovery. But you're still getting out there and moving, so you're not just jumping in completely cold whenever it's showtime.
Yeah. Yeah, basically anyone that I'm working with that's reasonably strong, I have them do basically nothing on peak week. It's just movement, but not real weight. Sometimes I'll have them go into the gym like Monday, Tuesday or something, but if they do,
Yeah.
it's like very, very, very lightweight, and just to keep them loose, because you kind of get stiff and cold,
Mhm.
if you will. And that's the only reason. It is definitely not to get them stronger. That's over.
No, yeah, for sure. And also having a little bit of movement is going to assist with sleep, which we could do an entire podcast. We probably even have one planned already about sleep.
Yeah.
But that movement, a little bit of light cardio or a little bit of light moving around the weights is going to help the sleep process as well when you're heading
Yeah.
into an event that your stress is already high.
Yeah, yeah. We don't want to delve too far into periodization, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a taste for what I think next week we're probably going to be doing, actually,
Hmm.
and talk a little bit about what a peak looks like and what to expect. So, as it
Yeah.
pertains to power lifters, power lifters have probably been the worst about like not doing any
Notoriously, yeah.
cardio. Yeah, it's a stereotype, and I think the stereotype holds up pretty well. I've been in that camp.
Yeah.
Like, and the only time that I think it's acceptable for a powerlifter to basically quit doing any real cardio aside from walking is like the last, you could argue like 8 to 12 weeks in a prep. That's where it can start to become acceptable, in my opinion. But the myth that like it's going to kill your gains or it's going to kill your recovery, you're going to have less muscle mass or something. Yeah, in a certain way, it's a competing recovery, but that's
Hmm.
more than offset by the fact that you're healthier, and a healthier person is going to recover better. If you're in better shape, your body is more efficient at utilizing resources, specifically energy resources and oxygen. That is what's needed to make progress in powerlifting. And so, like, yes, slightly competing, but that also only becomes particularly relevant when you're expending all of your recovery resources on competing. So like a prep,
Hmm.
like I said, towards the end. But when you're in off season, you shouldn't be going like as hard as you possibly can all the time. that's not a smart thing to do. And so like if you're training so hard, which by the way, hardly anybody is, a lot of people think they are, you're probably
Hmm.
not. All that to say, even if you were, then you should back off and do some cardio, because you're probably going to experience actually greater progress by being in good shape. And the other thing is, like, how long do you want to be able to do this? Like, if you just gain
Hmm.
a bunch of weight and don't ever do cardio and you just get bigger and bigger every year, like a lot of powerlifters want to do, where does this end? You're going to wind up with high blood pressure. You're going to wind up with other health issues, including joint pain and things like that, just from not moving. At a certain point, like, you're just going to be shaving 10 years off of your strength career. Is that really
Yeah.
something that you want? Do you want to like spend all you've got in like some like 5-year career in your 20s and then be like, oh yeah, I'm broken down and done now? Like, that doesn't make any kind of
Uh-huh.
sense.
Yeah, for sure. With the powerlifting cardio, it's not quite as much this heavy, high intensity that you're looking for, where you might want to practice some of that with strongman.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe a little bit of hit workouts, but kind of use that sparingly. What would be beneficial is something like jump ropes or box jumps, and some
Yeah.
kinds of things like that, or even sleds, because that will assist with your explosiveness as well.
Hmm.
And same for ollie lifting, anything that would help with your explosiveness. You may bring in some short sprinting or things like that for ollie lifting, but powerlifting, really, I mean, if you're walking, if you're doing incline treadmill, if maybe even some short, not as fast jogs, that's
Hmm.
enough, and it's more than most powerlifters are doing. It's not really a sport where you're getting super out of breath between all of
No.
your events and all of that, but you still, for longevity purposes, want your heart to be uh, cared for, your lungs to be cared for, and you're not really getting that just from the strength lifting. It's going
No.
to improve how your body uses oxygen. It's going to help with your blood flow, which is very important to do. Um, and it may even help with the way that you're bracing. If you're really in tune with how you can breathe, which you get from doing cardio exercises,
Yes.
then you can actually be more effective with your bracing as well if you're paying attention to kind of how you're taking those breaths while you're doing cardio.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that one key to understanding all of this is realizing what cardio is doing for your body. Cardio
Hmm.
is not making you grow muscle. It's not doing much else other than making you more efficient. Your heart doesn't become bigger, really. I mean, you do get athlete's heart, of course, but you get that from strength training or cardio.
Hmm.
Anybody like athlete's heart is actually the way a heart should look. That should be the default state of the human heart. It's just that so many people are sedentary. We actually gave a name for the better for
Right.
like what your heart should be, instead of like instead of giving a
Yeah.
name to the whatever we want to call it, atrophied heart. That's what
Hmm.
most people walk around with. But that's kind of a rant. Um, all that to say, what I would say to anyone who's concerned with those things is realize fundamentally what conditioning is doing. It's making your body more efficient at utilizing oxygen and energy. What do you think you need to recover? How do you think your sleep quality is going to be affected when you're better at utilizing oxygen? How do you think that your
Yeah.
ability to recover between sets is going to be, so that you can push more volume and so that you can do more sets and more reps and just do more? And the other thing is, like, if you're someone that's like in your off season, your training looks like taking 5-minute breaks between sets and stuff like that, you need to
Hmm.
tighten that up. Like, I get doing that when you're like 3 weeks out from a powerlifting meet. That's what I do. Totally get it. But
Yeah.
when you're in your off season and you're training in the like 60 to 80 percentile range, with the comp lifts, no, you don't need 5-minute rests anymore. Those days are over.
Hmm.
You should be resting for 1, maybe 2 minutes most of the time. Get in, get
Yeah.
it done, get out. And if that is something you're not recovering from, then address the cardio. Don't address like the strength, because that's really more of a recovery between sets issue. And then, potentially, like, and if you're sore all the time, then look at the program, look at your diet,
Hmm.
look at the other factors. But cutting out cardio is not the compromise you want to be making, especially
Right.
as you're someone
Hmm.
that becomes hypermuscular. um, like, that's good for you for metabolic health and everything else. But the reality is the bigger a person becomes, the more it becomes a liability once you get past a certain point. And most of us who are taking competing seriously are getting into the liability side of
Mm-hmm.
things. And we know this because, like, how many strength athletes, they get to a certain age, typically in their 30s, maybe it waits till their 40s or 50s, and they've been the same weight. They might even still be getting stronger, but their body weight's still been whatever, 270 pounds, 250 pounds, 300 pounds. All of a sudden they develop high blood pressure. What changed? Nothing, except
Mm-hmm.
that they got older and their body got less capable of managing that elevated body weight. That's all that's actually happening. It's not that probably anything else occurred. It's just that the older you become, the harder it is for your body to manage elevated body weight, whether we're talking about from pure muscle mass or from muscle plus body fat. You do need to do cardio to manage this. And taking drugs is just taking, like, especially most blood pressure medications, fundamentally what they're doing is removing stress from the heart and placing it on the kidney. That's pretty much what most of them are doing. Both of those organs don't repair themselves. Heart damage and
Yeah.
kidney damage are they're the main two organs that don't really heal. And by the way, damage to those is also associated with damage to your eyes. All things that we really, really don't want, and they're
Yeah.
all really lame ways to die slowly. So if you're a power lifter and you're in your off season, you don't have to be doing like what strongmen do necessarily, although I would still argue that it's probably beneficial, and I also think it'll carry over. Like, the ability to move
Mm-hmm.
with weight for me has translated to me becoming more statically stronger. When I got into strongman, I continued progressing strength wise. So if I did an on season of strongman and then I went into an off season and did powerlifting after, I always come back. Every year I'm stronger. Every year
Mm-hmm.
there's gains for me. And so, like, you don't have to be hyper specific. If you're someone who is gaining muscle mass, getting better at a strength thing of any kind in a sport, and making progress and in decent shape, you're going to continue making progress, and your blood pressure is probably also going to love you. Like, I just came at an all-time low body weight this morning, actually. So yay me. I was 249
Awesome.
pounds. I haven't been under 250 pounds outside of a water cut. We're not going to count that.
Right.
Like actual 249 pounds. I've been under 250 in I think since 2020. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I've been this light. My blood pressure during those times was generally very good, except for during times when I was on accelerated weight gain.
Mm-hmm.
My blood pressure this morning was like 118 over like 70 or something like that. I carry quite a bit of muscle mass. I should be stronger for how much muscle mass I carry, but we don't need to go into that. That's my opinion. But like, because I'm fairly low body fat at this point. But how many people are 250 pounds and like have great blood pressure? Not
Mm-hmm.
many. And the reason why is because I'm training and because I do cardio. I don't do much cardio, by the way. I'm sure you do way more than me. I do shuttle runs
Mm-hmm.
once a week, and that takes me 5 minutes to get the whole thing done. I do box rebound jumps, which is as much for training explosiveness as it is for conditioning. And
Mm-hmm.
those are both at the end of a leg day. And I walk a lot. That's it. I don't do incline treadmill even. I just walk a lot. I try to walk vigorously when I walk. And I try to walk like a few extra miles a day or so. But like, that's it. That's all I do. Blood pressure is managed. I don't take any drugs for that. I don't do anything for that. And if more strength athletes were thinking this way, we would live longer. We'd have longer strength careers, and you just enjoy life more. I know that when I wasn't doing my cardio and I wasn't moving around much, when I would like go for a walk with my family, I never get to the point where I was like huffing and puffing and I was dying or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I would get sore and I would get really tired and I would just kind of be like, oh, this is annoying, 1 mile and it sucks. And now at my body weight, I can walk around for however long, as long as I didn't just train legs, I can walk
Yeah.
around for a far longer time. If I'm walking with my family or we're doing something or whatever reason I'm on my feet all day, it's not a problem anymore. It used to be a problem for me. If I had to
Yeah.
be on my feet all day for something, it just kind of stunk. Like, I could do it, but I hated it. And now it's just like, it's not an issue. So also think of those quality of life things.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's doing this for money. There's no power. There's no, like, we have pro power lifters, but we don't really have pro powerlifters because the only way you make money as a pro powerlifter is by building a coaching platform or selling supplements or merchandise or
Yeah.
something, or, YouTube videos or something. None of us are like actually making a living doing it with prize money. You can do that in strongman at the very, very tippy top, but that's like,
Right.
there's like 3 women that do that every year and like 5 men, if that. And so like,
Yeah.
that's not going to be any of us. So don't like think about those priorities. And also like, you're not leaving pounds off your total by going for walks. I promise. It's not how it works. It's
Absolutely.
not going to be a problem. But what you might be leaving off is years with your grandkids and
Mhm.
joint pain, other things like that. I have noticed for myself and for my clients, just going for walks after, on leg days specifically, and other times, you do become less sore. You tend to struggle less with joint pain, specifically like hip pain and back pain. If you pick up a tweak during training, the like a little, your back pops a little bit or something like that, it's something minor. You still got through training, but it kind of sucked. Often a walk will help clear that up in a big way. And it's
Yeah.
not just the walk, it's not just the conditioning. It can also just be the fact that you're outside, your stress levels go down, you're getting sunlight, or whatever the environment might be. If you're out here, you're probably getting rained on. And so like, but either way, like even the fact, like depending on where you live, when your eyes see green, your pain levels reduce. It's just psychological. That's part of why like walking in a forest is so relaxing.
Mhm.
Pain level actually reduces with like green light. Green light therapy is a real thing. I actually used it when I was in after I had surgery and I've had injuries. I'll put a green light by me, and just ambient green light will reduce pain levels. It's like how it works. So I guess I'm kind of like going off here a little bit, but like, don't think that it's all about train hard, train heavy, and eat a bunch
Yeah.
of food. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, you got to do that for part of the year, but the rest of the year, you're not setting yourself up for success, because what you want to be able to come into in a powerlifting, setting, you want to come into have an off season where you're reasonably strong, but you're very volume tolerant. You want to be in at least decent shape so that you can let those things go during your peak. But if you
Yeah.
can't let those things go during your peak, then there's going to be less novelty, and you have no compromises to make. You sort of like, you're at the end of your rope because you started out in bad shape and you started out with no volume tolerance anyway. So like, you can't like
Yeah.
do sets of 2 and 3 for 16 weeks and expect to get anywhere.
Yeah, you shouldn't really be completely wiped out after every training session.
No.
And so cardio is going to help with that. And cardio and conditioning are terms that can be used interchangeably. For those who are cardio averse, I usually like to use the term conditioning because it makes it have more of a purpose in your mind. Like this is an adaptive thing. It's not, just just talking about your heart. Like you really do adapt to
Yeah.
more overall whenever you have it. And so conditioning, if you use that term, even though you're talking about the same thing, it puts a different image in the mind of someone who might not be wanting to do the cardio
Yeah.
because now it's complementing the sport,
Yeah.
even though it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So being specific with those, just like as coaches, we know cueing is very important. It's just another way to do that cueing, but for the cardio component of it. And I like what you said about reducing the rest times between sets whenever off season is the time that you're in, because it's going to make you more tolerant to the volume and
Yeah.
what you'll need to be doing later on. But like you shouldn't be complete unless you just finished a meet and you've done, left everything out there on the bar.
Yeah.
You really shouldn't be completely wiped whenever you're done with a training session.
Yeah.
And so incorporating cardio, whether it be right after, whether it be a different type of time of the day, is great. And using implements in that cardio, even if you're a power lifter, things like sleds, I would even do carries. I mean, it's
Mhm.
it's increasing, it's using that time under tension principle, but putting conditioning behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I think that like, uh, yeah, when you're prepping for a meet, there's a time and place for that, obviously. But outside of that, you shouldn't be like leaving it all out there, every time you train. You're gonna break something anyway. Something in your body's gonna give eventually.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But the other aspect is like, you should be able to recover enough between sets that your rest times can be just back down to like a minute in off season. That's
Mhm.
where like all of my athletes, I prescribe 1 minute rest times in off season for almost every lift they're doing, compound or isolation work,
Yeah.
whatever they're doing. It's a 1 minute rest. And part of that is because we have a lot of work to do. And pretty much everybody I work with is a
Don't
husband, a
have 2
father,
hours.
a mother, a wife, and have a lot of responsibilities. Yeah, they can't do these like 4 times a week, 2-hour training sessions. It's not going
Yeah.
to work. They can't do that. Just like I can't do that. And so like there's the practicality aspect, but there's also the like get in really good shape so that you can start, when you get to the off season, you can actually start, letting your cardio go and increasing those rest times. It's
Mhm.
amazing. I've had lots of clients tell me this, like, I hated your 1 minute rest times. They totally sucked, whatever. But now I see why, because when I give them a 2 minute rest time in a strength block, because we're just beginning prep, like you feel so much stronger between sets.
Yeah.
It's amazing what going from 1 minute to 2 minutes is. And then we make it 3, then in like the last couple weeks we might be up to 5 or something like that. And then
Yeah.
when it comes time to get on the platform, usually you've got like 10 minutes between lifts,
Yeah,
maybe
it's
even
quite a while.
longer sometimes. Yeah, you feel like you're back to 100% by the time you're done. You're not breathing heavy anymore. You've come back
Mhm.
down. Your heart rate has gone back down, and you've been able
Yeah.
to totally recover. You've been able to eat some carbs and sugar. You have enough time. You feel like you can just hit it hard every time you go. But
Mhm.
if you've been doing that in the gym, then there's no novelty there. There's no ability to like peaking. The definition of peaking, part of what's going on in like under the hood there,
Yeah.
is you're doing something that is extraordinary for you could never normally do, and you only
Yeah.
have like this little window that you've built. You spend weeks building it, and then you make it happen, and you have one special day, and you express all of this strength, all of the athleticism, whatever it is, and that's it. You're done. Just like with bodybuilders, you can only look like you look on the stage for a day, and maybe you can
Yeah.
like, I know you can go back and have another one the following week or whatever. That's a big complication. Doesn't always work out well, by the way. But like realistically, these are peaking events, and by definition, you can only be peaked for a very short amount of time
Right.
because it's not sustainable. For the bodybuilder, you're about to die. For the power lifter, I guess you're actually also about to die,
Yeah.
but just for different reasons because you've been a pig. So like, but anyway, I think we can. So brief shout out to Olympic lifters. I think
Mhm.
everything we said about powerlifters, I think it equally applies. The same modalities are good, although with a little bit more nod to consider in your off season explosive work for your conditioning. So
Yeah.
like rebounding box jumps. Um, I'm not a fan of dynamic effort in the way that Louis Simmons sort of like put it out there. I don't buy the like, if you can move a lightweight fast and you can move a heavyweight faster. I don't think there's any evidence to support that. I don't think that's a thing. I don't think it's real. So there you have that. But it's great for conditioning. It's great for familiarizing your ability to get that movement in a groove. Because think about this: if in your off season you squat 1,000 times versus 500 times, which do you think made you better at squatting? Probably the thousand
Probably the
times.
1,000.
I
Mhm.
would guess. Yeah, because either way, the last set was relatively hard, and that's the set that counts.
Yeah.
So that's where I go with that. However, specifically with Olympic lifters, they need explosiveness. Powerlifters don't, but Olympic lifters, yes. And so some of those dynamic effort type of formats might make a lot more sense for Olympic lifters because they need to explode in a way that powerlifters
Mhm.
don't necessarily. And so bands can make a little bit more sense in some of those other training modalities. And I would say,
Yeah.
like, if you want to push conditioning, then like do Olympic squats for really high reps. Do because they usually do a high bar squat.
Right.
Um, but all the
Or
rebounding
front squats.
jumps, yeah,
Mhm.
and front squats, yeah. Which, by the way, powerlifters, if you're not doing front squats, you're missing out. You should totally do them. I think strongmen kind of figured this out not too long ago, but like
Yes.
powerlifters, you should front squat. In my off season, I typically only front squat and I don't back squat, or I might only do cyclist squats. Every time I do that, my squat like 1 rep max goes up in my when I do a prep every time, and I
Oh
don't
yeah,
touch
you're
low bar
way more
back
solid
squats.
on the core if you've done a lot of front squats, and you can dig your way out of a bottom of a squat with that core strength that you build from doing front
Yeah,
squats.
yeah, that's
It'll
a good
make
way
it
to put
way
it.
easier.
Well, and they
It's
also the front squats especially, like they're really good for glutes, and that's what you need out of the hole in a squat.
mhm.
And I found that front squats really, really build glutes. I actually kind of think that they build glutes more than a like a low bar back squat, in my opinion. I could be,
Yeah, I think you can get a different angle. You get a little bit more of a disadvantaged position with the front squat,
mhm.
and which is also great for those who have longer femurs and have a hard time hitting depth on a back squat. Front squat can hit those things that you're kind of missing out on.
Yeah, that's a good point too. So for bodybuilders, this will be a shorter portion because bodybuilders don't really need to be told to do more cardio, I don't think.
Right.
But it's obviously very applicable. Amanda, can you talk about how that helps their volume tolerance? And then maybe also like, how does it change your look if you're in good shape when you're on the stage?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So with the strongman and the powerlifting, kind of doing a little bit more implement focused or explosive or something like that for cardio, you're not necessarily needing to do as much low intensity steady state for that, unless, let's say, you are trying to make weight. That is part of powerlifting for some people as well. So you might incorporate some of
Yeah,
that. That is the one of the only reasons. It's not the only reason, but one of the biggest reasons for bodybuilding is making weight. And for classes that don't have a weight, you're still hitting that level of conditioning. Um,
yeah,
Bodybuilders are already doing higher rep ranges than powerlifters and strongmen are. Well, depending on the season, but generally doing
yeah,
higher rep ranges, shorter rest times. So there's already a little bit of cardio capacity kind of built into the program. But
yeah,
when you are ready to get on stage, it's a tool for getting a little bit extra calorie burn without pulling
yeah,
food back as much. So there's two things going on there, but most bodybuilder competitors, when they're getting close to a show, their cardio capacity is quite high.
yeah.
And I'm talking like 2 hours of cardio a day is what they're
Yeah, 2
doing.
hours of incline treadmill. Yeah, like very
Yeah.
brisk walk. Yeah, yeah.
It's
It,
a lot of walking, a lot of stair climbing for the ladies. I've
yeah,
seen a lot of the guys do it too, but that's
yeah.
typically like one of the cardio things of choice, but it's not running. It's not
No,
it's not really hit workouts. There are some bodybuilders who do some of the high intensity interval training, but that they tend to not come in looking quite as shredded. Um,
yeah,
so and it could just be that the cortisol levels that you're causing a rise in by doing something that's a more stressful cardio. I think the least stress you can put on yourself doing cardio as a bodybuilder, you are already depleted. You are already putting all your effort into your training to keep that muscle on. So cardio is not the place to over fatigue yourself whenever
yeah,
you're doing it for bodybuilding purposes.
yeah. I totally agree. And I don't have experience with being on the stage, obviously, but having talked to a lot of bodybuilders and bodybuilding coaches, what I have heard too is the bodybuilder that steps on the stage that's in better condition, cardiovascular wise, is just going to look more hard and grainy and more cut.
Mhm.
There's just something that it does to the look, and I don't know if we know why necessarily, but you can get that like more paper thin skin look when you've done your cardio. Someone that's in not
Yeah.
as good a condition, you just can't pull all the water out the same way. I suspect it's because of greater efficiency with the lymphatic system, but I don't actually know, what's going on. I don't know if anybody really does necessarily, but there is a difference in the look. And
Mhm.
for health purposes, once you're getting to those really low body fat levels, you want to be able to rely on your caloric deficit coming from caloric expenditure, specifically in the form of some sort of lower intensity cardio, than pure diet, because you can only like get that from pure diet so much,
Yeah.
and you're not gonna get enough nutrients. Like at a certain point, like where are your vitamins and minerals coming from? Where's your fiber coming from? Where's the other things that you need? And it's just hard to get the protein in and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then you're going to be relying on, what, you're going to just have protein shakes all day, which is not
Right.
nutrition. It's a supplement. There's not nutritional value in a protein shake outside of pure protein. You're getting nothing from it. And so, like, you want to be sensitive to that, especially as a bodybuilder, because you're talking about depletion anyway. Bodybuilders can run deficient in all sorts of things because they just
Hmm.
can't eat certain stuff. I mean, like, a lot of bodybuilders have to take B vitamins because you're basically, you stop your red meat consumption. You might
Yeah.
also become anemic because you're you're not getting your iron in, because again, you're not eating red meat. And so, like, that's already enough of a concern. You want to
Yeah.
be eating as much food as possible for your goals, meaning that you're going to have to do cardio. And that's why, like, a lot of bodybuilders could sort of like get to the same stage weight
Hmm.
if they just did it with a pure deficit. I mean, it's theoretically totally possible.
Right.
But on a practical level, you'll be very unhealthy. It will be way harder to get there, and you're not going to look as good. You're just plain not going to look as good when you're not in as good of shape.
Yeah, it's theoretically true. You could get that lean just with pulling food back, but you are not going to look the same. And you're going to be missing a lot of nutrients. I mean, it's already really hard to get a bodybuilder to eat a piece of fruit in the last few weeks, but it's going to allow you to have higher calories. You're not going to have to dip as low if
Yeah,
you are expending. I mean, it's tiring though. It's fatiguing. You are hungry and you're still having to get out there and move. That's hard. That's a mental battle. That's just what you sign up for when you're competing in bodybuilding.
yeah,
But it's gonna also make you recover better whenever you start going the other direction after a show. When you're reversing, you pull back the cardio just as slowly as you added it in. You're not just completely taking it away. You would feel so bad if you did that. Like you would just feel like you ran into a wall. So
yeah,
everything is kind of pulled back slowly adding calories back. Some coaches will actually throw calories back quite quickly, like really jack it up,
yeah,
but they'll still pull the cardio back very, very slowly. And there
yeah,
is almost no time that a bodybuilder is not doing cardio at all. Um,
yeah,
even if it's just 10 minutes, it's just that
yeah,
important to keep yourself healthy and improve your longevity. And also, it removes that metabolic waste that you get built up from all the training. And that goes for all of the sports that we're talking about.
yes,
That metabolic waste is building up that blood flow from a little bit of cardio, whether it's intense cardio or low intensity cardio. It's
yeah,
going to help move away that metabolic waste. Of course, emphasizing good hydration at the same time.
yeah, 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 definitely. Well, cool. I think that's everything I've got for this one. So if anybody's listening to this and they're wondering, like, hey, where could I get some of that coaching? Come visit us at highcallingfitness.com. You could book a meeting with Amanda and talk further about how cardio could benefit your strength goals and whatever else you got going on. We do custom diet plans, custom training, and everything in between based on what your needs are, all tailored to you.
Yep.
And look forward to see you guys next time. Until then, gains and grace.
Gains of grace.